In 2023, a crack commando unit of retro podcasters joined forces on a panel at LA Comic-Con, but were sent to Comic-Con jail for a crime they didn't commit. These men promptly escaped. Today, still wanted by 80s nerds, they are very easy to find. If you have an 80s nostalgia problem, if no one else can help, maybe you can hire the Night Boys.
It's 80s Kids Unite. We're back. It's me, Zach. Corey's joining. Diallo's joining. And a brand new day for Night Boy, Wayne Cordova. He's a brother from another mother. He's also the host, co-host with his friend Greg of the Flip City podcast, and a patron for $2 late fee. So Wayne suggested today's topic, which is 80s movie soundtracks. Wayne, thank you for being a part of the Night Boy crew.
I'm honored to be a Night Boy. And so thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
And I think offline, Diallo said he's the closest day for Night Boy because Wayne's back on the East Coast. So yeah, he's closer to night than we are, Diallo.
Yeah. I'm in the future.
Well, we were just talking about Doctor Who a minute ago. So
I saw a good question or something the other day. Like someone was like, okay, if someone is born at midnight on the East Coast, but another person is born at like 8:59 on the West Coast, does that mean that the person on the West Coast is older than the East Coast person?
That's a good question.
That reminds Diallo stumbling with that reminds me of Jay trying to get that joke out at the end of Clerks. He's like, "Oh wait, I messed up."
Well, I was gonna go right to Diallo after Wayne because Diallo last month on 80s Kids Unite, he texted me afterwards. He goes, "You know what a really good topic would be for an 80s Kids show?" And I said, "What?" And he goes, 80s movie soundtracks. And I go, "Yeah, it would." And then I hit up Wayne, or I don't know, we were talking about having you on, Wayne, and you're like, "How about 80s movie soundtracks?" And I'm like, "What is going on right now?"
And then
crazy.
Zach, our friends Tess and Chelsea over at the Nerd Twins,
Yeah.
literally, and again, we have not announced this at all. Just like
Nope.
2 days ago, she was like, "Hey, we're going to do an episode on like just favorite movie soundtracks," and we were like, "What is happening right now?"
It must be in the zeitgeist. That's
must
so
be.
weird. That
Well,
is so weird.
This is a summertime episode, and I feel like, there's no bad time for music, I suppose, but the summertime is perfect. It's ripe for soundtracks, and I'm sure when people clicked on this or press play, they're like, are they going to talk about Karate Kid? Are they going to talk about Back to the Future? Are they going to talk about
Do they really talk
Who
like
are
that?
these? Who are these people that you?
There's
talk to?
literally two people that talk like that, and I'm
Well, maybe
related.
they're Puffer.
I'm related to both of them. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. That's a joke.
Snap.
No, snap. No. I wonder, when people saw this headline, 80s soundtracks, they're like immediately going to those favorites. But, Wayne, like when you were thinking of topics for this show, and again, you're a patron, and I encourage everyone to go to patreon.com/$2 late fee or patreon.com/podcasting after dark to support both shows. And you can suggest topics like Wayne. Wayne, what was it about this topic that you're like, I want to do 80s soundtracks?
So for me, soundtracks have always been part of my makeup, my DNA when I was growing up. I didn't have a ton of cash growing up as a kid. And so buying a album of a artist was a big commitment, right? Because sometimes you'd only have, 2 or 3 songs on there that you like, and then you'd flip it and pick a couple others. But soundtracks were usually bangers after bangers after bangers. And so for me, I was a movie guy. I loved going to the movies. I would even go by myself as a kid. And the soundtracks were the things that kept me connected to those movies way after seeing them. And so it was kind of like a twofer. My whole rack was full of soundtracks as a kid. And those songs would keep me going afterwards.
Yeah. Yeah. How about you, Diallo? What was it about you, like, where you're like, I think we should do this topic? What was it that like popped in your head to make you want to do that?
I mean, I was literally listening, like I got in a mood and I was listening to a particular soundtrack that we will discuss later. And I just was like, God, I love this. And that's what made me like, be like, oh, we should probably do this on the 80s Kids Unite.
Yeah.
Because especially because the time, MTV and I think we talked about it on another podcast. You were talking about what was it, what's his name? The soul singer, and he was on the soundtrack for some movie
Was it
with
Rick
another singer.
Astley or
No, it wasn't that.
oh,
You said
Michael
Rick Astley, a
McDonald?
soul singer.
Well, he's got that deep
Teddy
voice.
Teddy Pendergrass.
Teddy Pendergrass,
Yeah, yeah,
somewhere
yeah.
I belong. Yeah, from Daryl.
Yeah, and they started putting that, like, there was like this mix between the two, and like movie soundtracks started to become a thing.
Right.
And yeah, so I just have fond memories of listening to this particular one, and then it just, I don't know. Yeah, but I also like I'm actually more of a movie score person.
Hmm.
Like I really love movie scores, but
Future
there are,
topic. Future topic.
yeah, but there are a few. Yeah, actually, yeah. Like
Yeah, I
I
mean,
go
if we do
off on
movie,
that
we
one.
we could do an all John Carpenter movie score episode
Yeah.
too.
Oh,
yeah,
hold
yeah.
on, hold on.
Yeah. Hold on. Yeah, keep it in the bag. But yeah, but there are some soundtracks that I think are great, and I love them because of the way they exist in like conjunction and juxtaposition to the movie itself, and there's
Yeah.
like different grades and stuff. So I will talk a little bit more about it later when I talk about my pick, but yes, I love movies, and don't I don't know, don't listen to them as much anymore, so I don't know if they actually exist in the way that they used to.
Yeah,
So
that's going to be interesting to find out, like what our thoughts about said soundtracks that we chose.
mhm.
And I was thinking, Corey, you've said on record to me before, you're like, no pun intended with records. You've said you're like, I'm not really a soundtrack guy, but I would argue that you are. I would argue that there are songs from movies that really stand out to you from the 80s. But were you like a soundtrack collector back in the day?
No, I've always been less, auditorially gifted than I am visually. I was always a visual artist growing up. I always liked movies and visual mediums and stuff like that. And I didn't kind of get into music or sort of know what I liked until later in life. And then the funny thing is, what I figured out I liked was 80s music. So now that I'm older, I mostly listen to 80s music. But the soundtrack that I am going to talk about is near and dear to my heart, especially since, you mentioned, this is summertime. It's kind of weirdly the time of soundtracks because this is probably when I would listen to it the most because it's when I would be mowing the yard is
Yeah.
when I would kind of listen to this soundtrack all the time on cassette tape.
Your little Walkman, get that little wire and the
Little
Walkman
wire
on the
hanging
side.
down, and
Yeah.
and I was like, and just like I can the smell of fresh cut grass also accompanies anytime I listen to this soundtrack. But it is like the first soundtrack I owned. It's the first soundtrack that I kind of was aware, sort of its existence and everything like that.
Yeah.
And but yeah, you did. It's funny how you mentioned the summertime thing because that's my most like precious memories of this soundtrack is mowing the yard and listening to it and not really skipping things but remember just having to flip the tape and and everything. So
I would say the summertime mowing the grass, but for me also, if I got tired of a soundtrack on a video game, I would put my headphones on, a la Iron Eagle.
Yeah.
Iron Eagle was the inspiration for me to put on music while I was doing something else. And even though I've got a whole rant about Iron Eagle, but I'll save that for an Iron Eagle $2 late fee episode.
Dude, I used to play like this F-15 game on my Commodore 64.
Oh, yeah.
And specifically because of Iron Eagle, I would put the music. I was like, I can't do this without the music.
One Vision, One
Yeah.
Vision kicks in.
Yeah,
Yeah,
dude.
that's a
is
whole
that
other
you trying to land on the aircraft carrier in the Top Gun
Oh,
NES
Top
game?
Gun. Oh, yeah. That was
I
great.
love that game.
Yeah, I mean,
love that.
the soundtracks, no pun intended, were the soundtracks of our lives. It fueled what our day-to-day existence. Riding on my BMX bike, listening to a soundtrack, and feeling like I was in the movie. Mine in particular definitely caters to into that. But Wayne, I'm so glad you chose this topic. Diallo, I'm so glad you incepted this topic into our heads. And Corey, we're going to start with yeah. And Corey, we're going to start with you. We're going to get right into it. So Corey, what is your favorite soundtrack of the 80s?
Well, it's for a movie that came out in 1981. It is the first movie that Zach and I covered on Podcasting After Dark, and that is the soundtrack for Heavy Metal, the movie.
It's your one-way ticket to midnight. Calling heavy metal. I'm in that way. Calling heavy metal. No. Take the ride on heavy metal.
Music from the motion picture Heavy Metal. 2 LPs on 1 CD. In record stores now.
Like I said, I listened to it so much as a kid. Well, I guess first off, I should start when I saw the movie, pretty young. My stepfather was a huge fan of that film. And I remember, always hearing about how big of a deal it was, that it took a while for that soundtrack to come out on cassette and even the movie to come out on VHS, because they had a hard time, like, sort of locking down the rights and stuff like that. And it's a banger, soundtrack. So I remember seeing the movie. I remember watching it and being told to cover my eyes, obviously during, the sex scene, the big one, with the cabbie and everything. And like, all we had was like a quilted, blanket that had these massive holes in the quilt. So I saw everything right out of the gate. Love the movie. Zach and I talked offline. My favorite segment is, the B-52 bomber segment with the zombies and everything. But of course, Tarna and everything. But listening to the soundtrack, obviously I'm young, but it's the first time that I'm like, oh, I can visualize the scenes in the movie. I can see it in my head. And because I'd seen the movie so many times at that point. So I think my stepdad, spent like the $100 to buy the VHS when it came out.
Wow.
And everything. Yeah, he was really big into it. And so, like, I used to love all the songs, like, even Journey, was a little cheesy, but it reminded me of the sex scene, so I didn't really skip it, you know what I mean? And I was like, okay. But if I could boil, obviously I have a handful of favorites. The Sammy Hagar Heavy Metal one is probably up there. But over time, that probably would have been my favorite when I was younger. But over time, Reach Out and Take It by Cheap Trick has become sort of my favorite of the album. And it's a shame that, like, it's not on Spotify. People have, like, piecemealed it, putting it together. You can't find Radar Rider on there. I guess it's just not on Spotify. But I have owned I've owned 2 cassettes. I lost one, had to buy the second one. And I've owned it on CD 3 times. Once lost or broken, second stolen from when I left the car door unlocked. Third time I still have it. You know what I mean? So it's still one of my favorites. And I just got to say, Zach, to your point of, like, me not really being a music guy, I didn't really ever fall in love with another soundtrack, like, until the Crow soundtrack, like, on my own, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's not until later in life that I kind of hone in on music and stuff. But yeah, Heavy Metal, the score, Heavy Metal, the movie, the soundtrack is my first and still favorite soundtrack of all time.
Headbangers in leather. Oh, it's so badass. Well, I mean, if we ever do a 90s Kids Unite, that'll definitely be a topic that comes up, because that Crow soundtrack has a whole, we could devote a whole episode to the Crow. But
I was gonna say, like, in 10 years for some soundtracks, or 20 years maybe with Bodie, we can do 90s Kids Unite, and then we can cover some of those other 90s songs.
Oh, yeah. It's going to happen. It's going to happen, because all he has right now is the Minecraft soundtrack, which isn't bad, by the way, but that's all he's got, So lava chicken. Yeah. Wayne knows what we're talking about. And so does Corey, unfortunately, or fortunately, because that movie's really good.
It was great.
Highly recommend it. Wayne, are you familiar with the Heavy Metal soundtrack?
Yeah, so my background with heavy metal was an interesting one, because I grew up in that time period where, watching HBO and Showtime, and I remember that, like, heavy metal was always on, like, one of those channels. There was a channel, it was like on a regular basis, late at night, it would run. And so as a kid, that would be where, I would end up spotting it. And then of course, it was one of those movies that, so I grew up in a Hispanic household, right? And so it would be one of those things where if I was like sleeping over my grandma's house or my aunt's house, it'd be in the living room on the sofa bed, and I'd have the run of flipping through the channels and just looking back, see like who's looking, and then all of a sudden, heavy metal would come on right at the wrong moment,
Someone walk in.
my grandmother or my aunt, somebody would be like, "Niño, ¿qué es eso?" And then the chancleta would start flying, and so I always associated the soundtrack with like violence, and so it was a rough time. And so it wasn't until I was in high school when I worked at a video store. That was my high school job, first job, best job, and so it was that time when I finally had to actually watch heavy metal all the way through. And it was because as a staff, like we would have movie nights where, we'd close up and then we'd go and meet at somebody's house and somebody would pick it. And that was the first time that I really got to experience. And that was in high school is really when I started coming to my own with music and, really kind of defining what I liked, and heavy metal and hard rock. That was at the heart of it for me. And so the soundtrack itself for me was the actual laser disc, because that's what we ended up picking up, to watch on a regular basis. And so for me, I always associate heavy metal with scary moments growing up in my grandmother's house, and some of the best times working in that video store, because we would go back to it, and sometimes we would just play them. So when the boss wasn't around, we would actually play the laser disc of heavy metal when nobody else was around, and just so that the music would be rocking and all that. I never owned it, but it really kind of falls in line with what I would have owned had I had the opportunity really to kind of pick it up, because there were so many bangers just right off the bat, just Sammy Hagar, starting the thing off. By the way, I had to go to YouTube and pull up somebody's playlist from YouTube that had everything in order. And so I was doing all this research, and that's how I ended up, thankfully I was able to just listen on my, my phone and, drop my child off while jamming out the heavy metal. But but that was the thing for me, was like, just right off the bat, it's one of those soundtracks that just starts off just, in your face and loving it, but it's so connected to so many great, memories to me, that's when all that stuff flooded back. It was actually when I'm listening to the music and I'm remembering Journey comes on, and I'm like, that's the worst part for my grandmother to walk in and see.
Someone always walked in during that scene. It's like, come on,
It's like pro wrestling. In pro wrestling, it's great. Anybody watches pro wrestling, but they're always going to show up when Trish and Lita are fighting.
This is what it's about. No, canceled.
Sort of. It is sort of what it's about, though.
How about you, Diallo? Are you familiar? That's amazing, by the way. Diallo, are you familiar with the heavy metal soundtrack?
No, not at all.
And you're not. Is this a work or a shoot?
No, this is
legit.
Is this a shoot? I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know which one that is. No, I'm serious. I like heavy metal is a movie that kind of missed me, or I should actually more accurately, I would say I missed it. Like I remember distinctly when it was out and whatever, and it just it wasn't in my, even though it was like animated and it was, had that, there was something about it that didn't draw me in. And then on top of that, my parents wouldn't even let us watch Punky Brewster. Not that I like necessarily wanted to watch that, but so I would have had to gone to the movies or whatever. We didn't have cable like HBO. Like I only watched HBO when I was at my aunt's house, who just passed away. Rest in peace. But so that's that's the only time I would have been able to watch it. So it just never came across my radar. And then it was just like the association for me with heavy metal definitely was not into that genre of music.
Yeah.
So yeah, it always missed me. I actually watched it, I believe. I've only seen it once in like the mid 90s, I think, when I was in college. So I thought it was cool. But I also can't really remember anything. So like this impression that it has on Corey with the the sex scene. It's like I don't even remember one. So.
Well, I will say that this movie is in the same vein that Streets of Fire could be like a musical type film. Heavy Metal is definitely a musical type film because each vignette, each sequence has some sort of signature song associated with it. I might say the same with one of the other picks in this. Well, two of the other picks in this, because it's so soundtrack important. The soundtrack is essential to this. I was going to tell you, Corey, that my favorite song on the album, I thought about it over the night because you asked me last night when we were recording, what was your favorite song? I think Red Rider by Riggs.
Yeah, oh yeah.
That's my favorite song on the soundtrack. And the guy who sings that, his name's Jerry Riggs. He was in the Pat Travers band. If you don't know who Pat Travers is, it's a big 70s, 80s rock, guitar rock band. They had a big song called Boom Boom Out Go the Lights, and a song on the Valley Girl soundtrack called I La 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 Love You. So that's a really great song too. But anyways,
Nice.
that's my pick for your film. Great choice. I mean, here's the thing, this is what we love personally. So it's not about like what everyone else thinks. And Heavy Metal is one of those soundtracks that you go up and down. You're like, every single one of these bands, for the most part, is amazing.
And it's one of those things where like I listen to it so much that like even if I hear one of the songs on the radio in my head, I know what the next track from Heavy Metal, the soundtrack will be. And it just and if I don't hear that next, I'm like, oh, something's wrong here.
Yeah, you get everybody listening or watching this on YouTube. I think YouTube Music is a great source for these soundtracks, particularly because Spotify does not have the rights to some of the lesser known artists. And we all have at least one artist on one of our soundtracks where we're like, where it happened to that guy or where'd that guy come from?
I use YouTube. I don't use YouTube like at all for anything, but I use it for one thing, and that's to listen to Bump in the Night from the Witchboard soundtrack because that song is an absolute banger.
Yeah, and I will add to that too. I will piggyback on that statement that, when we talk about soundtracks, as far as I'm concerned personally, I am picking a soundtrack from pretty much beginning to end, a soundtrack that I love. There might be one or two that I could leave out, but for the most part, and there are some soundtracks, many soundtracks from the 80s, where there's one or two songs that are great and the rest are not so much. So, by the way, shout out to Vision Quest because I think that might be one of my favorite soundtracks, but I'm going to leave that one out. Anyways, let's jump to you, Diallo. Your favorite soundtrack of the 80s. What is it?
So I was in the mood a few weeks ago. I was like, oh, I just feel like listening to this soundtrack because it's got like all these bangers on it. And it was Rocky IV.
It's the soundtrack for the next World War. Rocky IV. Featuring Burning Heart from Survivor. Living in America from James Brown. Plus hard-hitting tracks from Kenny Loggins and Gladys Knight, Go West, John Cafferty, and more. Rocky IV. The soundtrack is a knockout.
Available now at all Pathmark Supercenters.
Oh, you mean this one?
Oh, that one. Yes.
Signed by Vince DiCola?
Yes, that's the one. That's the one.
I'm just going to hold it up while you talk.
Yeah.
That's the bubble.
So, yeah, I mean, I had it, I think I probably borrowed it on, and never gave it back on cassette. So I didn't have the album. But yeah, it's sort of like a cross section because it has what do you call it? I Had the Tiger on it from Rocky 3, that kind of sneaks up on you a little bit later in the album.
Yeah.
Starts off with Burning Heart. But then it has a couple of on this soundtrack, it has a couple of the score pieces from Vince DiCola, which one of my all-time favorites is Training Montage, which used to be on my running playlist. Whenever it would come on, I would do my sprints, and also one of my all-time favorite songs, Hearts on Fire, which I performed in karaoke before. It's
by John Cafferty,
and then John Cafferty. Living in America, that was a great piece. So I love this soundtrack because it's sort of like a cross section between some of the songs were in the movie because obviously No Easy Way Out is just one of the all-time bangers of forever. But then there were other songs that didn't quite like they might have been like in the background or whatever. Because I remember there's a One Way Street, I think, is like in the background in like I think the scene with the robot. I'm not really sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't remember the song with what's his name?
Kenny Loggins.
Yeah, Kenny Loggins and
Double or
Gladys
Nothing?
Knight. Yeah, I don't remember that being or Sweetest Victory is another one. I don't remember it being it, but I also liked that they were on the soundtrack because it just I don't know, it just kind of filled it out a little bit.
As a kid, I hated it when you had like an awesome banger and you'd hear it. Maybe they'd use it for the trailer or something like that. And then in the movie, it was like diegetic sound. It was just like coming on the radio or something for like 2 seconds. You're like, what? No, like put this in a scene, you know?
Yeah. So, but I liked how it like it went back and forth with that, because there was another soundtrack that I was contemplating, which was Batman, and then there is also another one that I thought of, like, obviously, you know how I feel about Purple Rain. So it's like, why is he leaving Prince off of his list? But like Purple Rain is like different because it's really like I never actually really thought of it as a soundtrack album.
Right.
I think of it as Purple Rain.
Right.
And there's a movie where the band is performing the songs from the album. And then with Batman, it also like I like a lot of the songs, but I don't know, it was this weird contractual thing going on, and I don't know, it just whatever. But this was sort of like this typifies like what soundtracks were and became, especially in the 90s. Some of my favorite soundtracks are from the 90s, but this one just brings me back to listening to it when I was in high school, sitting in my room alone on Friday evenings by myself, which I still do.
In high school.
He's still in high school. Diallo
He's still
is
in high school.
Yeah. What's that? What's that movie with Adam Sandler when he goes back to
Billy
school?
Madison. Yeah.
Billy Madison.
Yeah.
No, he's pulling a Dangerfield. He's going back
That's
to
me in high
school.
But there's a connection. You mentioned Dan. Oh no, you mentioned Streets of Fire, and Dan Hartman actually wrote "Living in America."
Yes, he did. Yes, he did. And you mentioned "No Easy Way Out." That's by Robert Tepper.
Yeah, Robert Tepper. Yeah,
who co-wrote the song, one of the most sus songs of ever. It's that she's just 16 years old. Into the night by Betty Marjones
yesterday,
which is a great song.
That came on yesterday.
Great song.
Yeah, and I'm just
problematic
like,
lyrics.
Oh man, yeah, like. I feel like I need to turn it off, but it's actually so good.
It's so good. The melody's so good,
Can't you just change the words a little bit?
Yeah,
it'll be
she's
fine.
just 26 years old,
Well, the older we get, it'll be she's just 60 years old. And then,
now she's 60 years old.
Now
That's the
she's
thing.
60.
Now she's 60 years old. Yeah, I mean, Winger could have done that with 17, but they didn't either. But I'm going to save my thoughts to the end because I have a lot of quick takes on this soundtrack that I love. But Corey, your thoughts on the Rocky IV soundtrack and favorite song on the Rocky IV soundtrack?
I probably my favorite Sylvester Stallone movie is this one. I mean, not gonna lie, I'm not the biggest Stallone fan. I wasn't growing up. I was a Schwarzenegger JCVD kid, throwing some Dolph Lundgren in there, but Stallone was probably my least favorite, kind of still is. Never really cared much for the Rocky franchise, but I do remember seeing this one in the theater with my dad. And I do remember, again, not being terribly musically inclined, being like, oh, the music's a lot of fun in this and everything. So listening to the soundtrack last night, I listened to everybody's because we all knew what we were going to pick.
Right.
So I was listening to everybody's and, I was like, wow, there is a lot of cool stuff on here. Vince DiCola's stuff is really cool. And obviously we're going to maybe talk about more of those, later. Maybe. But yeah, I don't have much experience with the soundtrack up until recently. So I'll just say that my favorite song, and Diallo, you mentioned, all the a few of them that were in the runners up and everything. But man, mine's honestly the cheesiest one probably on the bunch. But I love the Sweetest Victory. I actually really,
Sweetest victory.
That is oh, I was just so I just went on a walk and I was listening to it to get ready for the show. And like whenever Sweetest Victory comes on, like I love there's like a part towards the end where it gets really quiet and they remove all the other instruments and it's like almost all synth and that's like it just sends me to like this other place.
it's I mean, and it's
Chef's
weird
kiss.
because like again, I'm kind of I mean, I've heard all these songs, but I'm really paying attention last night the first time. And when Sweetest Victory came on, I don't kind of love how it started, and I was like, oh, this one's not going to be one of the ones I'm gonna think about. By the end of the song, I'm like, nope, this one's my favorite.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's it.
Got a fun fact about that song in just a moment, but
Is
Wayne.
it problematic? Oh my
No,
God.
no. It's
Oh no, don't cancel it.
no canceling. It's more like, well, I'll get to it in a minute. Wayne, your thoughts on the Rocky IV soundtrack, which may or may not have a connection to your soundtrack.
Listen, I was trying to put together a Venn diagram of all of our picks, and 3 of the 4 are directly overlapping and connected.
They sure are.
And so that's the pretty cool thing. But this was my alternate. Rocky IV
Nice.
was actually on my short list of favorite soundtracks of all time, specifically because there's an overlap to Rocky 3 and 4 in the soundtrack. And so thankfully they added Eye of the Tiger at the beginning of the movie so they could include it in this soundtrack. And Rocky IV, first off, the Rocky movies have a deep rooted connection to me and my family. I think this is the one movie franchise outside of the original Star Wars trilogy that as a family we've gone to go see everything up to 4. In 5 I was in my adolescent teenage years, didn't want to see anything with anybody related to my family, but then as then it goes on
You
from there.
skipped the right one.
Yeah.
But then we go through that soundtrack alone. I remember immediately going out and getting it when it was out, and then just all of those songs one right after. You talk about it being like your running playlist, and that was on my workout playlist, back when I worked out, but it was it was that I don't want to, it's on my eating playlist now, but but the thing about it
Whatever
is
gets you through, whatever gets you through.
You look
gets you
like
through it.
this. You look like this.
I've had a hard decade this year, and yeah, those abs, I have one of them. I have one rock solid one in the middle. And,
Hey, we
that's
all
I
have
need.
abs. They're just
They're all
hiding
there.
sometimes.
They're
Yeah.
in there somewhere. But I gotta say, so there's 2 things. This movie itself plays in my annual. It's in my annual rotation for my July 4th movie film festival that I hold in my living room. And so this movie's in there.
Nice.
And so I'm actually gonna say this. I have a strong, deep-rooted connection to Hearts on Fire and on No Easy Way Out. But I'm going to say that my favorite song on this album, seriously, since I was a kid to today, is Living in America. I
Wow.
love this song because this was the first, like, as soon as coming out of the theater, I was singing that song, even though that's the song that's playing right before Apollo dies. But it's just that gets me, upbeat and jazzed up. It gets me ready to have a cookout, have a grill out. When I'm actually on the super highways, I'm singing those songs because I'm on the East Coast and I've done those drives up, and so it's just one of those things where I love it when I'm traveling. I love it when I'm cooking out and grilling. And to me, that's just like, it's a celebratory song, man. Even though I don't like the outcome of what happens afterwards in that scene, it's the one song in the movie that doesn't throw the towel. It doesn't actually connect me to that scene. It's kind of funny. Everything else does, but that one really kind of just brings it out of me, and it makes me happy. So that's the part of Rocky IV that I enjoy the most.
Oh, wow. Well, I will say, I echo everything you guys are saying. I will say that the Rocky IV soundtrack might be in top 5 greatest soundtracks of the 80s of all time, because it really, even the songs that you're like, maybe I don't like that song so much, it's still a really good song. One Way Street, I still really enjoy. And I agree with you, Diallo. It's placed in a moment of the movie where you're like, oh, I don't really hear it all that much, but it's there. And same with Double or Nothing, which I think Double or Nothing should have been cranked up. It's a
That is one
great
of my
song.
favorite songs on the album is Double or Nothing.
Double or Nothing,
I
yeah.
love it.
Kenny Loggins and Gladys Knight. I want to shout out the fact that on the soundtrack, it's Eye of the Tiger. It says this song has been previously released. So I think that's kind of funny because the Rocky 3 soundtrack, others than the Survivor song, it's not so great. It's just, mediocre. This soundtrack and this movie, and I've covered this movie on $2 Late Fee. I've interviewed Vince DiCola a couple times about it. And extensively, this movie plays like a music video. It really does. It's 90 minutes. It's quick. It's done and it's over. Each song, like I said, Corey, with heavy metal really sets up the scene for the most part, it's a classic. It is really a classic. And Vince DiCola is, to this day, I think, one of the most underappreciated composers of the 80s because he formed what our childhood memories are. Like this movie, people often say, oh yeah, the Rocky franchise. I remember that scene at the end of Rocky where, he's calling out for Adrian, but it's really Rocky 4. You remember everything, even the robot. I freaking love the robot. I don't care what anyone says. I think it's amazing. And it's one of Paulie's, it's the best depiction of Paulie. He's not like angry. He's just kind of like this. He's a comedic relief. Dolph Lundgren is the greatest, villain of the franchise, I think, because let's be honest, Clubber Lang was just freaking cool. A lot of people wanted to be Clubber Lang because he's such a badass. I love this soundtrack. I'm so glad you chose it, Diallo, because it is an end-to-end burner, as my wife Kristen would say. And I guess my favorite song, if I had to go with one, would be, I think Sweetest Victory might be one of my favorites too. And that's the thing about Sweetest Victory. It wasn't supposed to be on the soundtrack. Originally, Glory of Love for Karate Kid 2 was supposed to be.
I love that song.
So Peter Cetera, that song was originally made for the Rocky 4 soundtrack, and it was supposed to play during the credits.
That's right.
But Sylvester Stallone pulled an audible. I don't know if this is gonna work out, and then he pulled it off, and the rest is history. So
there's a multiverse somewhere where it's on the soundtrack.
Right.
I mean, in the way that it shook out, I actually think that was it would have changed the texture of this album. And I love it for Karate Kid too. That song, every time it comes on, which is like almost every day, Glory of Love, it's like I sing the whole thing, but it does feel more like romantic. You know?
Yeah.
So I definitely...
And that song is integral in the movie.
Yeah. It's actually in the score. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So, anyways, that's my little fun fact for that. And wow, great choice, Diallo. Both of you guys. I'm just like, I got my playlist for the whole day. Okay, so Wayne, you may or may not been joking when you said there's a connection between this soundtrack and yours. Would you please tell everyone what your soundtrack is?
All right. So this movie is probably one of the most impactful movies that I ever watched at a kid, because it is the first movie I cried watching. It's also the first movie that I saw by myself. And so like I remember having, my mom bought a ticket and she went with me, but I think I was 9 at the time, and I said, "Can I sit over there and you sit over there?" And she was like,
you probably broke her heart.
Oh, I probably did. And I'm gonna have to ask
What
her.
is growing up?
And I sat in this row, and I just remember watching this movie and feeling every single emotion, because I felt like at 9 years old, I'd been waiting for this movie my entire life.
Yeah.
And then here it was, and it broke my heart. But by the end of this film, that soundtrack is what I took with me forever. I've owned it in every iteration that it exists right now. And so it is the Transformers, the movie, original motion picture soundtrack. There it is.
This one?
Beyond good, beyond evil, beyond your wildest imagination. Transformers, the movie. A new evil threatens the galaxy in the hottest summer adventure ever. Be part of it. Enter our ultimate Transformers sweepstakes. Grand prize is this stereo cassette player plus movie souvenirs. Over 100 winners get movie soundtracks or the Transformers hit single The Touch. Get this bumper sticker just for entering. Send a stamped self-addressed envelope to
Transformers Contest, Post Office Box 29943, Parma, Ohio 44129.
Transformers, the movie. Opens everywhere August 8th, rated PG.
Signed by Vince DiCola too?
I don't know. The connection between that one and Rocky IV tenuous at best.
Yeah, I mean, come on, let's be honest.
And then the Venn diagram extends over to the next one. But oh gosh, yeah, that I have I even had the 45 back in when the movie had come out. They had flipped in. They were selling a 45 of Stan Bush singing The Touch. And then the B side of the 45 was Weird Al Yankovic with Dare to Be Stupid. And
Wow.
the whole soundtrack, the thing about it, so not only what you have Stan Bush, singing The Touch, right? Then you literally have what I honestly I have to say is my favorite heavy metal song of all time, which is Instruments of Destruction by
Instruments
NRG.
of Destruction.
The vocals at the very end of that song, just when he is just screaming, I mean, that I felt that and I sang that out loud as a 9-10-year-old kid in my living room so often. And then of course you have the, like, literally, by the way, spoiling the movie in the release of the album that came out before the movie, Death of Optimus Prime.
Yeah.
that album came out before the movie came out, and it spoiled that whole thing.
I think the same thing happened with Phantom Menace.
Yeah, with
score.
Toy.
Yeah,
Yes.
well, the score for Phantom Menace had Qui-Gon's funeral or something.
Yeah,
and everyone was
wow.
like, what?
It was so what I honestly, one of the songs that I think is the sleeper. It's kind of like the B-side to The Touch, but Dare is such a great song. It's such an adventure song that I tie that directly into the scene, where Hot Rod is off and doing. Oh man, fantastic!
Yep.
Nothing's gonna stand in our way. Unbelievable. Nothing's gonna stand in our way. Not tonight.
I think that would be a really great wrestling theme song for a wrestler to come out, a tag team. Nothing's gonna stand in our way.
In my fantasy fed, I had a number of these songs as the theme songs to my made up wrestlers. And
Me too.
that was it. Hunger's another song. I want it so bad I can't taste it, and just that you go in that job. You go to a job interview and listen to this song first, and you're getting that job. You're getting that job.
Yeah, dude.
And then of course just Vindicola, just his songs. That is the soundtrack of my toy plane.
Yeah.
Because when I would come out, I mean, I would play that for everything. G.I. Joe, Mask, Transformers, obviously. And just that was the backdrop. And this was the soundtrack I would play when I got tired of the soundtrack on video games, is I would pop that on and I would play it. And then you literally have the king on this album right here. You have Weird Al with Dare to Be Stupid closing out the album. But again, it's like I always associate Dare to Be Stupid with the Junkions and Wreck-Gar and all that kind of stuff. But to me, this was Weird Al was the star on this album for me, because he's the one I was the most familiar with when I bought the album. And I was like, I can't believe they got Weird Al. And that was the thing for me with this album. It's like this movie, it's even one of those movies where I didn't show it to my daughter until just like recently, because I was like, this is a very special movie to Dad. Star Wars, Rocky, all these different films we saw at an early age, but I was like, this movie is special to me. And if you don't cry when I cried at this scene, I don't know who you're related to. But
did you have onions ready just in case to make sure she cried?
Just poke somebody up. But it wasn't. It was that emotion at a young age for me. I just remember being so connected to the music of that song. Yeah. And again, like, I didn't get to see the movie again. This was in the 80s. The movie came out. I saw it a bunch of times in the theaters, and once it left, and I had to wait forever for it to come out on video, or on a video that I could afford. And see it again. So that soundtrack was the movie for me.
Wow. Wow. And I will say really quickly, Dare to Be Stupid was produced by Rick Derringer, rest in peace, who, as of this recording, just passed away at the age of 77. And again, was a huge part of especially young boys in the 80s watching wrestling or cartoons because he had a huge hand in wrestling theme songs.
Oh,
Exactly.
my favorite wrestling theme song that he produced was Demolition, Axe and Smash.
Yeah.
Here
That
comes the
song,
axe. Yeah.
that song belonged on the Transformers soundtrack too. That would have been so awesome.
No kidding. No kidding. Diallo, what are your thoughts on the Transformer soundtrack? You think it's mid?
I think it's mid, no cap.
Skippy Riz.
Little Niecy Bug said that like she was telling some story the other day, and she was like, blah 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 blah, no cap, and I just was like, threw me off. So, yeah. So I'm not like super familiar with the soundtrack actually, but I know it. So I've like watched the movie and know it mostly through the movie, so I get a texture of the songs or whatever. But then I know really well. I know Touch and Dare. So like those songs were in my like little like playlist of stuff. But then the rest of the song, like I don't know the songs, any of the other songs, but then I know the score, right? So, but it's, I mean, yeah, Vince DiCola, like Zach said, he's like one of the most underrated composers there is. But yeah, I mean, Touch there's like a magical place that it touches in your heart. But then like Dare has like you guys were saying, has that adventure. Like they're completely different songs. I prefer Touch. I've heard it expressed that some people like Dare more. But yeah, so that's my access to the soundtrack. Two thumbs up and two
in a twirl, in a transfer,
Two
in a
auto.
Yeah, I was trying to think of like a transformer, like
don't know.
two gears up. Yeah,
He's the lesser known Autobot named Thumbs.
yeah.
That's all he's got.
A pulsable thumbs up. Yeah. It's so it's great. That's what I got. That was the other one too. I didn't see it. I think we talked about this before. I don't know, but I didn't actually see it in theaters. It was like I didn't see it till it was on TV, and it was like broken up into like a week long.
Yeah, 5-parter.
Yeah, so
Right. Oh yeah, I remember when they did that.
So I just like I don't know why. Like I don't know why I never saw that in the theaters. I don't know why like I didn't have the album, but I just for some reason it just came to me a little bit later than other stuff. But it's still a great one, and I have a modicum of nostalgia from it, but more from when I was listening to a lot of it in the early 2000s, late 90s.
Yeah, nice. Now, how about you, Corey? What are your thoughts on the Transformers soundtrack?
I mean, I saw the movie in the theater. I can still remember seeing it in the theater and, having my mind blown. But my experience with the soundtrack is very similar to Diallo's. It's like I got everything through the movie. I never like owned, the soundtrack itself. So again, listening last night is kind of like the first time I'm actually going through it and sort of listening to it. And, I mean, it's certainly the first time I'm listening to it with like a critical ear and everything. And I gotta say, my favorite score is always the Unicron melody. I like the
Oh yeah,
and it's such a big echoey sound, like it's like him breathing, and I love it when it's there. But we're not talking about score; we're talking about soundtrack. And I'm in the Dare camp. I love the Touch, of course, but Dare is my
Why
favorite.
do you hate the Touch? Why do you hate it?
Just because it's not my favorite, I hate it.
You're gonna go, why do you hate it?
Why do you hate it?
I can say I think I love Dare because I love the scene that how they use it in the movie. I get chills during that scene, when the ship's coming in and everything like that, and the transformation flipping in the air. I mean, my God, I'll get chills watching it. And it's amazing. I absolutely love it.
Yeah.
Growing up, I wasn't the biggest Weird Al fan, and so I didn't kind of listen to Dare to Be Stupid too much. And now listening to the lyrics now, and I hear one of them's like, "Eat a lot of sushi and don't pay a tip," and I'm like, that's a bad thing to sort of tell kids to not tip your waiter.
It's a stupid thing to do.
Exactly. Dare to Be Stupid.
There you go.
But yeah, this movie was huge to me as a kid, even though I didn't, have the soundtrack, this movie was still huge. I loved it. I cried when Optimus Prime died, and I still to this day love Unicron. I think he's so cool. Love that shot when he just puts his hand down on Cybertron, I think. Or was it no, it was the other planet at the beginning. But I mean, regardless, it was also when I realized that like movie animation is different than TV show animation,
Yeah,
and there's a lot
yeah.
more movement happening
Totally.
in it and everything. And I loved everything about it. But yeah, this is my first time really going through the score. And yeah, the Vince DiCola stuff is amazing. The whole soundtrack and the whole score is amazing. The whole thing. I do like it when they sort of put them all together and you get like some soundtracks and then you get some actual, not I don't say actual songs, but like lyrical songs, and then you get some score, and then it jumps. And I like that. It had the soundtrack has like a vibe. It has a flow to it that I really enjoy now as an adult, and I really like. I mean, I guess there is an art form of like, and I know there is with albums of like how you place the songs, what song leads into another, and I guess with soundtracks, I guess you can probably do it just in the order that they come out in the movie. But I think it's probably better to put them in some sort of order that sort of tells a tale. And I think there's an art form to that,
One of the things when you talk about the difference in TV animation and movie animation, that was the first time I'd experienced basically like a redo of the theme song. And so like when Lion did the Transformers, and it just adds that extra bit. It's like somebody watching over you. And I'm like, this is amazing. And that's the thing is like it just felt completely different and
yet familiar.
Right. And it's like, oh, this is my Transformers, but it's new. And I couldn't imagine seeing it for the first time like as a 5-parter because it's like it's such a thing. I wish you had a TARDIS, Diallo. I wish you had a TARDIS.
Yeah.
And,
I mean, I've seen it multiple times like since, and and I actually prefer it to G.I. Joe the movie by far.
Oh yeah,
we actually saw it. Like Zach, Corey, were you there too when we saw it at like the Egyptian theater?
Yeah, I remember we were at the Egyptian. They did a screening of Transformers the movie and G.I. Joe the movie on the big screen with the actors there as well.
Yeah, so I've seen it multiple times and I love it to death. But yeah, that was sort of my first, and I think I don't know. I had already known about like Optimus Prime dying and stuff. So yeah, it might have been better if I had seen it in real time and cried or whatever. But
did you know that the poor response to Optimus Prime dying was the reason why they kept Duke alive by the end of the G.I. Joe movie?
It's crazy.
I did show
Duke too.
I showed Transformers the movie to my nephew. He's 9 now, so he might have been closer to 5-ish at the time because I was trying to instill a little Saturday morning, excitement into him. And I showed it to him, and like halfway through the movie, he's like, I don't know who anyone is. Like, like if you go into that completely fresh, he's like, he has no idea who the bad guys are, who the good guys are. He thought it was fun because like, I don't know what's going on. And I was like,
funny.
Oh yeah,
This Unicron guy seems like a nice guy. He's like,
Megatron, he's a good guy, right? He's pretty cool, right? I was like, oh yikes. No.
I will tag on to all of this discussion. You guys know how much I love this movie, clearly. And again, I interviewed Vince about it. He talked about how he had a very limited amount of time to record the score for this. That's why some pieces are similar to Rocky IV, especially the Unicron theme is similar to when Drago comes up through the ring in the fight scene against Apollo in Rocky IV. But if we didn't have the touch in this, we would never have that scene in Boogie Nights, which is probably one of the greatest scenes of Boogie Nights when Dirk Diggler is singing "You Got the Touch" or "The Touch." So, thank God for that. Also, a guy named Richie Wise produced "The Touch" and "Dare." Richie Wise was the producer of the first 2 Kiss albums.
yes.
So he had a big hand in help shape what Kiss is today, whether you like it or not. Dude, yeah, I echo everything, Wayne. It is such a time capsule film. I think out of all of these, it's the one that I hold dearest to my heart as far as childhood memories are concerned. Corey, you were talking about the song selection on the soundtrack and how it's placed on the soundtrack. It always kind of bugged me because I liked the order it was in the movie. So when I like listening to a soundtrack that takes me directly into the scene in the movie and it goes from one to another. So at one point back in the 80s, I did make my own tape recording the songs off my cassette tape and putting it in order, which made me feel great. And then the tape got eaten. Didn't make me feel great. But now you can do that on YouTube or Spotify or make your own playlist like I do on Apple Music. But anyways, I love that soundtrack. Great choice. I'm going to take us home with probably the most obscure out of the three with my choice. It's from 1986. And this movie, the movie soundtrack, I feel is quintessential to the film itself, because if you take these songs out of the movie, it's not the same. And it is from The Wraith, which I have on vinyl and cassette.
Opens Friday, November 21st at a theater near you.
The Wraith soundtrack, for those that don't know, The Wraith is about a couple who are making out in the woods in their cabin, and they get assaulted by car pirates. The boyfriend gets murdered, and he comes back for revenge in the body of Charlie Sheen. And he also is in a cool like racing jumpsuit that is all black, and he drives a Dodge Interceptor and drives around and basically crashes his car, causing the pirates to die in the car crash. The soundtrack has a connection to both Transformers and also has a connection to Rocky IV, because the opening song, which is my favorite song on the soundtrack, by the way, and I think, by the way, Dare and Touch are like equal to me. I can't pick one over the other, so I'm just going to say both, as Bodie used to say back in the day. Soundtrack to this has the opening song by Tim Feehan. It's called Where's the Fire? Tim Feehan, you may not know who he is, but he sounds to me like the singer from Mr. Mister, but it's not. It's a different guy, but he's so good in this. There's a great music video you can find on YouTube. I might put a link to that in the show notes, and you can check it out. Honeymoon Suite has a song on here. They are a big Canadian band. Shout out to our Canadian brethren up north. And then Hearts versus Heads by Stan Bush. If you listen to the lyrics of Hearts versus Heads, it's a little sus, as the kids would say, but just read into the lyrics. Yes, Hearts versus Heads, plural, gives you an idea what he's talking about. Hold On Blue Eyes by LaMarca might be my favorite, like, love ballad of all time. That's the one kind of, well, there's two sussy scenes in this PG-13 film if you want to show your kids The Wraith, but there is some nudity in it, and it's Sherilyn Fenn, and there you go. And that's the scene where the song plays, but it's a great scene. There's a song called Young Love, Hot Love. Young Love, Hot Love. It's a quintessential 80s cheese. You got Secret Loser by Ozzy Osbourne, one of my favorite Ozzy Osbourne songs during this time when, like, this was the 80s Ozzy, which mid 80s, which I think for me is my favorite Ozzy. Never Surrender, not the Corey Hart song Never Surrender, but Never Surrender by Lion. Lion on this, different from the Transformers soundtrack, because Lion on the Transformers soundtrack, all capital. In this one, the L is capital, the rest are lowercase.
No, all right.
And then you've got the song called Bad Mistake, decent rock song. Wake Up Call by Ian Hunter. Ian Hunter was in Mott the Hoople, I believe. And then Bonnie Tyler, Matter of the Heart. If you don't know who Bonnie Tyler is, Total Eclipse of the Heart, and then she's got Matter of the Heart. So you put Total Eclipse and Matter of the Heart, and you got yourself a nice little bookend songs. I love this soundtrack. It's by the Scotti Brothers. I believe there's a documentary coming out about these guys. If not, there needs to be, because it's pretty wild. They produced a lot of the great soundtracks of the 80s, like Eddie and the Cruisers, for example, which is another one I think that could end up on our all-time favorite list. But yeah, I only watched The Wraith on VHS back in the day, and that's where I first saw it. I remember putting the tape in the VCR, and you hear the Lightning Video logo come on, and it goes into the Where's the Fire? That it's perfect. in my opinion. I love The Wraith. Start with you, Wayne. What are your thoughts on The Wraith?
Okay, so here's the funny thing. As a listener of the podcasts, right? I came into $2 late fee and podcasting after dark and everything late in the game. So literally in the last 2 years. And so for me, I started doing deep dives into listening. And so when you said The Wraith, I was not surprised at all because all of my listening has been, from binging on the last few years. And so I know your love of The Wraith, right? And so when you said that, I was like, of course he's picking this because I didn't see The Wraith growing up. I saw it because you recommended it. And so
I saw it because I had to do an episode with Zach on it.
I remember, and it was like I saw it because I was like, oh, okay, let me check this out. And holy smokes, I don't know where this movie was my entire life, but it was so much fun to watch in general. But it helped me understand you a whole lot more, Zach, because I was like, this is his favorite film. But it starts off right away so good, and that's Where's the Fire is my favorite song. For me, I think every soundtrack, every album, it's got to start off great. And that was the thing. And that song, the way that it starts, everything is just so of the time. And it's just such a thing where it's like, when was this album? 1986?
1986, yeah.
And it was like, that tracks really well. And so for me, that was huge. The Wraith soundtrack itself, so I saw the movie a long time ago, a couple of years ago when you first recommended it, and then I saw it again just recently. And this soundtrack is the movie. It's just like the listening to the soundtrack really does kind of take you through and walk you through this film. And so to me, it's it being from 1986, but being a recent view for me really does make me wish. I was like, man, I wish this was like my video store days. I wish this was one of those times where I could just recommend it to people. I was like, you really want to see something wild? You got to see them.
Yeah, no kidding. I know. I don't want to spoil too much because Corey and I did break it down with Dustin back in the day, and it is awesome. I will also mention too, because there are songs in the movie that didn't wind up on the soundtrack, and that's a whole other discussion that we will save for the Iron Eagle soundtrack, because sadly that is one why that did not wind up on our best list. Diallo, what are your thoughts
on you?
It is on me. It is on me. For me personally, what are your thoughts on The Wraith and the soundtrack of The Wraith? Or just talk about Sherilyn Fenn.
Yeah, I didn't even know who she was until you were talking about her on one of our podcasts, and I looked her up and I was like, she's all right. It was a name I had always known, but I just never put the face with the name. And I've still have never seen The Wraith, and so not familiar with this soundtrack at all, even less so than
heavy metal.
Yeah. But I love the names on it. I do.
Hey, that's all you need. All you need.
Like, no, it's impressive. Like, Lion, Bonnie Tyler, yeah, and Stan Bush, Ozzy Osbourne. I actually don't know any Ozzy Osbourne songs at all. I don't know one. I know he bit a bat. He didn't. And then I know him from his show in 2000s and that's the 90s and 2000s. That's about it.
Got a wonderful family.
Well, if you want to hear some wild Ozzy stories, go read the book Dirt, the Motley Crue story, where Tommy Lee tells some interesting stories about Ozzy on.
Was it snorting ants?
Snorting ants and pooping in hot hotel rooms. Good times.
Wait, he was in Motley Crue?
No, but they toured together a lot.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Well, speaking of Motley Crue, we got a Motley Crue song on this soundtrack. And
so not on the physical soundtrack, but in the movie, Smoking in the Boys' Room, off of Theater of Pain, I believe that's off of.
Yeah, and I was a huge Motley Crue fan growing up, and as you heard on the episode, I think that Zach that was our first $2 late fee podcast after dark crossover episode.
Yes,
the Wraith.
We interviewed Matthew Berry, who's in the Wraith, and he's great. Tells some great stories.
Yeah. So that was my first time, I think, watching it. And yeah, it was such a fun movie. I very much enjoy it. So I don't have much connection to the soundtrack. Obviously, last night was again one of the first times that I'm listening to it, critically and everything. And gotta say, I'm gonna start out a little bit. I didn't love the Bonnie Taylor song on here, and I love Bonnie Taylor, but this wasn't
Tyler, yeah.
one of my favorite ones. I'm a huge Robert Palmer fan, so I was thinking about maybe Addicted to Love, but
Also in the movie, but not on the physical soundtrack.
so it's funny because I think I'm landing where you guys all landed, and I'm gonna go with Where's the Fire. I was like, oh, it can't be the first song. I'm listening to the whole album. I'm like, I can't just pick the first song. It sounds like I didn't do the research, but it's true. Where's the Fire is my favorite song on it. And, I actually, I just added it to my 80s greaties playlist as well, and, obviously it has the touch and everything, but no, Where's the Fire is awesome. But Zach, like, Hold On Blue Eyes, I like that one too. I like a lot of these, on here. It's just funny. I was like, Bonnie Tyler. I was like, oh, I love her, but I didn't quite love that song.
Well, that's why it's
But real
buried at
quick,
the end. It's buried at the end. So
I kind of have that feeling. But real quick, if you're watching the YouTube version of this, Zach has a Streets of Fire poster behind him. That was on my short list. I mean, I knew I was doing heavy metal. You know what I mean? Like, I just knew that I was. But also, too, the Streets of Fire soundtrack is a new discovery in my life. But boy, oh boy, can we just give a little shout out to the Streets of Fire soundtrack, especially Fire Inc.
Yeah.
All of their songs are just fire.
Fire, exactly. And the lead vocalist has like a little Bonnie Tyler rasp to her a little bit, but
He does, yeah. I noticed that.
I will tag on, by the way, the Ozzy Osbourne song "Secret Loser." Great guitar riff by Jake E. Lee. He was the lead guitarist for Ozzy during that time, and I think he's the reason why Ozzy had such catchy songs during that time. I think Blizzard of Oz was the first album he was on, or maybe Bark at the Moon. I'm not sure. Anyways, and I will also mention too that this soundtrack, I have the cassette and the album, but I was thinking about first songs for all of our albums. First song on the physical soundtrack. Mob Rules by Black Sabbath is the first song on the heavy metal soundtrack.
Yeah.
The first songs on the other soundtracks, Burning Heart by Survivor was the first song on the Rocky IV soundtrack, The Touch by Stan Bush, and of course, Where's the Fire by Tim Fian on The Wraith. And it's like that first song really has to draw you in. Otherwise, you're like, why did I buy this at the record store for $6.99,
I think it's because when I was actually looking up the soundtrack, I did, like, Corey, you kept bringing it up. Like, I found it interesting that there's a lot of songs in the movie that weren't on the soundtrack, and I actually really wondering what's up with that.
Yeah.
It's one of those things I was gonna bring up is the fact that probably the pet peeve that's more than just the song that's in the movie for a little bit, but it's on the soundtrack. The bigger pet peeve is the song that's in the movie but not in the actual soundtrack. And when that happens, because sometimes you're watching the movie going, oh, this movie's great, I gotta get this soundtrack, and then certain songs aren't on it. And it even happens now, like even in modern time, where I'm like, well, they couldn't pay for this to be on the soundtrack or whatever, but it kind of breaks it a little bit.
I've said it before, and I'm sure I'll say it again when we cover the Iron Eagle on $2 late fee. But Eyes of the World by Eric Martin. He was in the band Mr. Big. Eyes of the World is when he's training with Chappie. That song's not on the soundtrack. Also, You're old enough to rock and roll during the Cessna flight scene where he's flying against the motorcycle. That song's not on the soundtrack. And I'm like, those two songs, Rainey Haynes is the singer for that one. She actually went out and like got the rights to the song, and then she was releasing it on her personal website for a while, which was really cool. But I mean, those two songs to me, like couldn't wait to put that Iron Eagle soundtrack in. I'm listening to One Vision. I'm like, yeah, what's the next song? And then it's like, Never Say Die, Iron Eagle. And I'm like, that's a great song. I really enjoy it. But,
Well, it's just funny thinking about talking about Wayne songs that like weren't on the soundtrack but are still synonymous with it. Going to the '90s, Starship Troopers, when they put the song number 2 by Blur, like woohoo, it's in the trailer and it's not in the movie, and I don't even think it's on the soundtrack. But like, to me, anytime I hear that song, I immediately think of Starship Troopers, and I wanted that song back in the day just because of that.
That reminded me of Guardians of the Galaxy, I think, 2, their trailer, they had a song on the trailer. I can't remember what it is now, but that song was such a banger, and it didn't end up in the movie at all.
We could almost have a whole episode on like trailer songs that are great. Because The Watchmen had a great redone of a song or something. I loved that trailer with that song. But yeah, it's like sometimes the trailer music becomes so synonymous with the movie itself as well, even if the music's not in the film itself.
We might have to devote an episode of 80s Kids Unite to our favorite 80s movie trailer.
That'd be cool.
Which we could do that. Look, but it's up to you guys, the fans, the listeners. It's up to you to decide what we do on this show. So go to patreon.com/podcastingafterdark, patreon.com/$2 late fee. The links are in the show notes, and you can join today to help support the show, but also select the topics for 80s Kids Unite.
As long as it happened in the 80s, it's all open. It could be, what type of drugs did you use?
Yeah, exactly.
What kind of charges did you get released from?
Flintstone vitamins.
It could be anything.
I was hopped up on Flintstones.
Flintstone vitamins.
We might have to do an episode on that for sure. Wayne, you are a part of the Flip City podcast. That's your show. And we'll put links to Wayne's show in our show notes so you can check out all his great content with Greg on there as well. Dude, you are the official Day for Night Boy East Coast edition. Thank you so much, man, for joining us on our show.
Guys, thank you so much. I had such a blast, and I really appreciate you letting me have some space in the East Coast office of the Night Boys. It's great. Nobody else is here, so it's a quiet place to come and work. But no, thank you guys so much. I appreciate it.
Night Boys East Coast. It's like Avengers West Coast, Night Boys East Coast.
I thought the same thing.
Dude, I like that. All right, so everybody, thank you so much for joining us. Next month, new topic. This is my birthday month, so I feel like, hey, it's celebrating my birthday with the 80s Kids Unite.
He's only 16.
Hey, yo. Let us know in our show notes here on the episode or on our Instagrams, all the Instagrams. Go let us know. Flip City, we'll link to Flip City's Instagram as well. But let us know what your favorite soundtrack is, what your favorite song is from the soundtrack. Do you agree with us? Do you not agree with us? If you don't agree with us, then go listen to something else. Anyways, love y'all. Be safe, be well. As always, what did we say?
Catch you on the Day for Night side.
Catch you on the Day for Night side. Perfect.
80s Kids Unite is brought to you by Hungry Hungry Hippos, the loudest tabletop game in history. And by Nickelback, Zach's favorite band. If you'd like to suggest topics for this show, go to the Patreon of either $2 late fee or Podcasting After Dark, or both. All links are in the show notes. We love you.